Messi! It is the cleanest of clean finishes from the best on the planet.
It's time for the biggest sports stories.
Liverpool, the champions of Europe, are top of the world.
The biggest interviews.
That such a great spectacle is ruined by such thuggish behavior.
And all the analysis right here.
He's the one player that has the arrogance to think that he can play in any stadium in the world and any pitch in the world in front of any player in the world and take them on.
Every weekday, it's my sport, it's your sport. It's ZiFM Sport. Let's join the team for the biggest show in the world of sport on ZiFM Stereo. My station, your station.
Last week it was a social distancing edition, and now we are getting into the lockdown edition. Welcome to it. This is ZiFM Sport on a Monday, Manic Monday, the lockdown edition. From their homes, you'll hear from Barry Manandi, Mike Madoda, Mark Paz, Chris, and Alois Bunjira. My name is Sean Tafrinika, the producer. I hope you are staying at home and keeping safe as we fight together against the spread of the coronavirus. In addition to the topical discussions we'll be having, we're still going to keep you up with what's happening on the local front and internationally. So look out for the local news roundup and around the world in 60.
From Rufaro to Barberfield, Mandava to Nyamunga, all the perfect moments in the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League come together on ZiFM Sport.
Tonight, we are talking about hair rentals. The rentals saga wages on, and the question the Z team will answer is, should hair rentals expulsion from the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League stand? A good point to start will be with some background on the issue. What did hair rentals actually do? For that background, let's hear from Mike's take.
Welcome to Mike's Take, an informed and opinionated view of the world of sport.
Hi guys, and welcome to yet another edition of Mike's Take, and today we are talking match fixing in local football. If you're a follower of Zimbabwean football, you'll know that scandal and controversy have never been too far from local footy. Asia Gate and Limpopo Gate are terms we've become familiar with over the last decade as Zimbabwe football's moral rectitude went due south on the Moro campus. Scandals on the international stage involving some of our best known and most loved football personalities. A recap: games were fixed in the Far East, and the reputation of our national team, the Warriors, was soiled. Was started off with almost comical deception with local club side Monomotapa. They are now defunct. Well, they went to the Far East masquerading as the national team in a friendly versus Malaysia, and it soon of course took a more sinister turn with more friendly matches organized in Asia and more matches fixed. And of course in more recent times we've had Limpopo Gate. Now the global match fixing industry, it is estimated it has a value of well over $1 trillion. And I think Zimbabwe was perhaps naive in thinking that it would never come knocking on our door. And I think that naivety was so ruthlessly exploited by notorious global match fixer Wilson Raj Perimal. So was I surprised at the back end of season 2019 in the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League when I heard that Herentals College Football Club was being accused of fixing their match versus Black Rhinos? A big fat no. Not in the least bit surprised, because match fixing has lived with us in Zimbabwe for a while now. We've grown up hearing stories of it from schoolboy competitions, the lower leagues, that's Division 1 and 2, as well as the Premier Soccer League. We've become masters in Zimbabwe at sticking our heads in the sand and pretending that nothing is happening. We've turned a blind eye to a problem of pandemic proportions. Referees on the take, players and coaches compromised, club officials and administrators handing out khaki envelopes. Now, Herentals and their official Oliver Chirenga, they were found guilty of contravening Order 31.1.3 of the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League rules and regulations, which I'm just going to try and paraphrase here, which makes it an offense on the part of a club where its players, officials, servant or duly authorized, that's expressed or implied, representatives give, offer, or promise, whether directly or indirectly, any inducement, reward, or bribe of whatsoever nature to anybody whatsoever. The judgment that came down from the Premier Soccer League, Chirenga, was fined $20,000 and banned from any football-related activities for 10 years. Herentals College Football Club, they were fined $300,000 and forfeited the 3 points gained from their 3-0 win over Black Rhinos. The net result of which was that Herentals are relegated from the Castle Premier Soccer League, having survived relegation by a single point. Herentals have subsequently filed an appeal against this judgment. Now, the whole saga raises so many questions. The first one, how many other teams could have been compromised by Herentals during their fight for survival? Another one, how many other teams were and are involved in match fixing in our top flight, never mind the lower leagues? Another one, for how long has the match fixing been going on for? Are there match officials involved? Are there any administrators involved? And for me, there are other even bigger questions. One could ask, why has there been a reluctance to tackle match fixing and corruption in sport decisively? I ask that question because when I look at the punishments doled out by the Premier Soccer League, and I think, listen, there's simply a slap on the wrist, very lenient in my book. What's $300,000 to Innocent Benza and his education empire? That's chump change. What message does a mere 3-point deduction send to would-be perpetrators or those already in the match-fixing game? What was needed was a punishment that struck a definitive blow against match-fixing and one that set an example. Internationally, I think we have the examples of Olympique Marseille in France's Ligue 1 in the early 1990s, where punishments went as far as prison sentences. Yes, prison sentences, relegation, forfeiture of their league title, all resulting in financial repercussions that I think Marseille still have not recovered from up to now. Let's go to Italy. Juventus was stripped of silverware and had the double whammy of relegation and a massive points deduction, meaning that when they were relegated into Serie B, they had to start with a points deficit. The investigation was also so thorough that it ended up dragging in Lazio and Fiorentina into the saga, as well as a number of match officials, notably Massimo Di Santis, who was supposed to be, I think, Italy's representative at the 2006 World Cup, which was hosted in Germany, but he had to be withdrawn after he was implicated in the match-fixing saga. So, another question that begs asking is, how thorough was the PSL's investigation and how extensive was it? Because if you speak to people who have been in the game long enough, they'll tell you that matches have been getting fixed from time immemorial, and many of the perpetrators have gotten away with it. In fact, some are actually still in the game. And when you take a look at this entire situation, sadly, the biggest loser in all this is the fan. How can we trust that what we are watching is real? When we go to the stadiums, to Mandava, to Barberfields, to Rufaro Stadium, to Sakuva, to Vengere, how can we trust that the product that we are seeing on show is actually real? Are we paying to watch matches whose results and outcomes have already been decided? Are we investing our time, resources, and emotions to players, teams, and competitions that lack integrity? I think the PSL and ZiFM should have handed down punishments that would have shaken the very foundation of match fixing in Zimbabwe league football and acted as a deterrent. As it stands, one gets the feeling that the only message that has been passed is, don't get caught. That's my take.
Mike's Take. Don't forget, you can follow Mike on Twitter at Mike Madoda or catch him every weekday on ZiFM Sport. Z.
Mike's Take is available wherever you get your podcast from. Go and subscribe and download. Now, Mike talked about how match-fixing punishments should be decisive and heavy so as to serve as a deterrent. Match-fixing shouldn't even be an idea for clubs to even consider, yet alone to actually carry through. Now, Herentals had their joy of return to the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League cut short after the Premier League disciplinary committee expelled the club from the league for taking football matters to court. Now, that judgment was from the PSL. But then ZiFA, the Zimbabwe Football Association, then overrode that decision and acquitted the club of any wrongdoing. So what's going to happen now? The PSL is saying one thing and the ZiFA is saying another. Well, let's kick things off with Barry, who's going to flesh out this saga for us some more.
Thanks very much, Sean. Once again, welcome to the social distancing edition of ZiFM Sport on your favorite station, ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station. Now, in these strange and novel times in our world, we hope you are keeping safe, staying at home if you possibly can, and avoiding unnecessary journeys. And if you are out and about, please ensure that you avoid any bodily contact with others. We all need to play our part to defeat this COVID-19 scourge. Don't catch it, don't spread it. And remember, the golden rule is to maintain hygiene, wash your hands often, sanitize often, and stop the spread. Albeit that we're in different locations, we will continue to deliver all that's happening in the world of sport and to keep you informed as well as entertained. And as Sean said at the top of the show, today we are talking about the students, Herentals, who in the past week have been given a broad lesson in the laws and rules of football. Now, in my view, I reckon that this presents with it a conflict of interest on both parts. I think the first conflict of interest exists around Herentals Football Club themselves. They were before the disciplinary committee of the Premier Soccer League as soon as the season ended. I think around about October, even before the season ended, they were cited as to be go before the DC to answer to the charges against them in that match against Black Rhinos. Now, knowing that, they still proceeded to then give a donation, albeit that it was very needed, to ZiFA for the Young Mighty Warriors. That was the first red flag. They continue to support ZiFA, and ZiFA themselves should have turned down any donation coming out of Herentals on the basis that this is a team that had charges hanging over their heads. They needed to distance themselves from it and at least let those charges be cleared. So that's the first conflict of interest, Herentals and ZiFA. But then there's another one that rears its ugly head on the basis that with the Premier Soccer League enforcing the rule that if you take footballing matters to the courts of the land, in this case the High Court of Zimbabwe, then you may be cited and punishment as severe as being relegated or removed, ejected from the very league that you're participating would hang over your head. Herentals proceeded to do that, and the Premier Soccer League has, within their purview, gone ahead and done that. Now, here's the conflict of interest. The PSL ruled initially that Herentals was guilty in that case against Black Rhinos. The ZiFA Appeals Committee then ruled that Herentals did not have a case to answer and there wasn't sufficient evidence to hold those charges and uphold the ruling made by the PSL DC. They then overturned the judgment, and Herentals, in that case, was reinstated into the Premier Soccer League. Now that Herentals is back in the league, the PSL wants to enforce the fact that no, you are going down and you are going out. So they've ejected them from the league. Now this then begins to smack of almost victimization of Herentals Football Club. It may not be, but certainly there is the appearance of evil. So on both sides, I think this entire case was handled incorrectly, and a lot needs to be corrected to make this case come right. I don't think we've seen the back of this case. There's a lot still to play out in this Herentals VPSL with ZiFA as the shadowy character in the background. These three parties need to clean it up and sort it out.
Now, Barry points out the conflict of interest that exists, stating that ZiFA shouldn't be accepting a donation from a club who have a serious pending allegation. He also argues that maybe PSL are being harsh, but shouldn't they be? I mean, this is a serious matter. It's match fixing. The way the PSL has handled this, though, seems to be by the book. This is basing on the press release. It's been detailed. There has been step-by-step communication. We've seen how this has flowed from the time the allegations were made to the judgment. But with ZiFA, the details are sketchy and the lack of clarity is very apparent because they have not really communicated on what basis they have decided to acquit Herentals. Let's switch our attention to what Alice has to say because he has some insight on the football constitution and the purview of power as far as the PSL and ZiFA are concerned.
I think the Rentals case is kind of like complicated because there are a lot of constitutional issues, and a lot of issues of that nature that were infringed, and it's like people have got these constitutions in their tables, in their desks, but they don't really like follow what is in the constitution, and sometimes you wonder if we actually know what is happening with the constitutions and all that. When you start hearing stories, you start hearing that the Premier Soccer League has no power to fire a team or to expel a team from the league because the teams belong to ZiFA. So now, did the PSLDC not know that was the issue? So it becomes complicated now. We don't really know, but from my understanding, I think the PSL, before they expel the rentals, they need to consult with the Zimbabwe Football Association disciplinary committee or just ZiFA to communicate to them that this your member who is in our league that is affiliated to you, he has done ABC. So in that light, we don't want that club in our league because they've taken us to court, blah blah blah, and all that. So ZiFA, being ZiFA, they also know the rules. Then the respect that they know that this is our club. Then they are the ones that will say, okay, the punishment that you want us to meet, we can carry it over, or they can negotiate for a different punishment. This cannot be a decision that is carried out on the team by the Premier Soccer League alone. I think they will need to share the decision, consult with the ZiFA, because according to the constitution, PSL as an entity is just an affiliate of ZiFA. It's not a member of the ZiFA Council, but the club is a member of the ZiFA Council. So it's more like PSL, they are a shell that doesn't have anything, and then they get clubs from ZiFA that play in their league. So I think that's how the setup is. That's why you can actually see that the Premier Soccer League clubs can actually vote individually because they are members of ZiFA individually, so they cannot be sacked. So if they are sacked from, let's say, Herentals is sacked from the Premier Soccer League, where do they go? Because they are still a member of ZiFA. So I think they need to talk to each other. So I can actually see that this issue is going to be revisited and a verdict is going to be reached. But this is going to be a mutual verdict between the Zimbabwe Football Association and the Premier Soccer League. Not one of them taking a decision and say, we don't want that one, because it becomes complicated. Because ZiFA will come back and say, you know what, you didn't respect us enough. Why did you fire our member without notifying us first, or without deliberating this issue with us first? That kind of thing. But like what happens in all the leagues, I think in Zimbabwe it's kind of like flawed. I've never heard when, let's say, Tottenham Hotspur or Liverpool commit a crime, I've never heard the Premier Soccer League punishing Liverpool. It is always the FA, the Football Association, fines or punish clubs because the clubs belong to the association. That's how I see it. So I think they need to come together, the Premier Soccer League and ZiFA, to actually come clean and actually talk about it, map a way forward on how football should be run. Premier Soccer League should not have their own independent DC that punishes clubs, because I don't think they have that mandate. I believe that the mandate is with the Zimbabwe Football Association. When a club does something wrong, I think PSL should push the matter to ZiFA, and ZiFA then punishes. That's what I see everywhere else in the Bundesliga. The Bundesliga doesn't punish the clubs. It is the German Football Association. The English FA is the ones that punish, that sanctions clubs, not the Premier Soccer League. I don't know, I might be wrong, but that's how I see it. So we'll wait and see how the rentals issue comes out, but I still believe that it's going to be void and the rentals are going to be reinstated back into the league again. Let's wait and see what happens.
From what Alois is saying, the PSL as an affiliate of ZiFA should have consulted the association on their judgment. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that ZiFA is compromised and that their waters are muddy. Their relationship with the Herentals is well documented, so that makes them problematic. What do you think? Hit us up on social media. We are at ZiFM Sport on Facebook and Twitter. Now, coming up is the local news roundup with Paz, and then we'll go to our power play.
The Home Front. Local sports news and analysis.
To our local sports roundup, we go to rugby, and their players and coaches may be under the COVID-19 induced lockdown, but the Zimbabwe Rugby Union have had something to smile about in these tough times following the news that World Rugby backed the country to become the second best nation playing the game in Africa after South Africa. World Rugby representative Dave Gilbert, who was recently in the country, believes Zimbabwe has such an abundance of talent that only needs to be used to its full potential for the country with time reach the kind of levels that reigning world champion South Africa have scaled. To athletics, and South African-based female long-distance runner Rutendo Nyaora says she is taking a break from her intense training schedule following the postponement of the Olympic Games and 21-day lockdown in her base. Nyaora is amongst the local athletes expected to qualify for Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games and has been busy with her build-up to the Games before they were shelved until next year due to the coronavirus pandemic. And in boxing, former World Boxing Federation Africa heavyweight champion Elvis Moyo has set up a makeshift gym in his backyard where he's training with his 16-year-old son Craig in South Africa during the coronavirus lockdown. Moyo, who hopes for a non-title fight with Ukrainian-born heavyweight pugilist Oleksandr Zakozensky in Germany, said he has been keeping fit by exercising at home. The Johannesburg-based Moyo, popularly known as the Bulawayo Bomber, said the shutdown caused by the pandemic coronavirus caught him by surprise as he hadn't budgeted for the long forced break.
Hi, I'm Clemens Matau, chicken in midfielder. You're listening to ZiFM Sports.
You are tuned into ZiFM Stereo, my station, your station. This is day one of the lockdown edition of ZiFM Sport. Tonight we're talking about the Herentals saga. Should the Herentals expulsion from the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League stand? That is the question that the Z team is answering. Before the play of the day, we heard from Barry and Alois, who talked about the conflict that ZiFA and the PSL are in over Herentals. But for now, let's hear from Chris, who speaks on whether we can, without reasonable doubt, trust the system.
It's been an interesting off-season for Herentals. We've seen them in and out of the news, and for the wrong reasons, quite on brand for them. And it's usually around whether or not they should remain in the Castle Lager Premier Soccer League. It's up in the air at the moment, and the powers that be seem to be making conflicting decisions. ZiFA and the PSL are making different decisions and essentially leaving us to wonder exactly what is going on in our football as a whole. So for me, I tend to look at the overall picture and what happens long term in terms of this situation. So what's the potential damage to the league and its credibility? So match fixing in the rest of the world is an incredibly serious offense, and it results in stern punishment, including, for example, life bans and hefty fines. But very often we find that in Africa it comes with a slap on the wrist, and even worse in Zimbabwe, probably no reprimand, little to no reprimand at all. So this casts doubt immediately on the PSL as an organization and on the rest of the clubs still participating in the PSL. And this effect comes right down to the players in the PSL. Are they good enough for the league, or do they simply come from a team that is able to fix matches? From a reputation management perspective, there's definitely damage that has been done to the PSL and its ability to affect decisions. So their teams playing in lower divisions and they're eyeing the Premier League spots. And in order for the rest of those leagues to remain competitive as well, those teams must truly believe in the system and the opportunity for promotion. The best teams must be in the Premier League. That's why it's called a Premier League. And this should be quite clear for everyone participating in different areas of our football. There should be no doubt as to whether a team is truly in the Premier League on merit or whether it's because they have access to large amounts of money. The impacts of the Herentals donations on decision making is one thing that we definitely need to look at and say, they've made some hefty donations, and I say hefty in the context of Zimbabwean sport, where we simply wait for donations and we don't generate any income. For example, to renovate the dressing rooms at Barbourfield Stadium, which were condemned by the CAF inspectors. Now, immediately, this compromises anyone in ZiFA, particularly the appeals committee, because this is now a team that is contributing to national causes. Will a fair decision be affected when Herentals is now a de facto sponsor? Now, all of this confusion is a direct result, obviously, of one thing, and that is the fact that there is now no rule of law in our football. If there was, the matter would have already been solved, it would be settled, and there would be no confusion in regards to the decision that is to be made regarding Herentals and the match-fixing allegations. Now, there need to be clear procedures that are not in any way compromised by a team's financial positioning, and these procedures need to be public knowledge. Take, for example, ZiFA's appeals committee. Who selects the committee? Are they completely free from bias and compromise? Are there checks and balances in the system? These are things that we need to be looking at in the wider scope of Herentals and their effect on Zimbabwean football. These are some of the things we need to think about when it comes to this case. It's not just about the next league season, it's about a precedent being set and its impact on Zimbabwean football as a whole.
Z. Now, I agree with Chris's point on Herentals being a de facto sponsor of ZiFA through their donation. There's no way that you can trust ZiFA to be impartial and fair when they are this compromised. They are friends of Herentals. Let that be very clear. So how are they going to dish out the relevant judgment and look at the merits of this case with clear eyes? And it makes me think, where do we go from here? Let's hear from Mike, who gives us a summary.
It's a very good evening, Zimbabwe. Hope you guys are doing as well as can be expected under the circumstances. Now, talking about Herentals, like I summed up in Mike's take, for me, they are just a college of corruption. We've all heard the stories. We've all heard the whispers about what's been happening as far as Herentals is concerned in lower league football and now in the Premiership. And there are a couple of instances now, or incidents, that the Premier Soccer League has had to deal with regards to Herentals Football Club. And for me, you know what? The evidence is there. The smoking gun was there. The confession was there. And there's no need for ZiFA really to allow themselves to be compromised to this level for them to wish that Herentals gets away scot-free. The PSL is fighting, but unfortunately, they are fighting against the mother body, and any suspension can only be ratified by ZiFA. So for me, I point all my fingers at ZiFA and I say to them, you've got to be more serious. You've got to strike a definitive blow against match fixing. Herentals taking advantage of the need that was at ZiFA, taking advantage, of course, of the financial situation, the economic plight of the game in Zimbabwe, to come forward with a few donations, a few actions here and there that endeared them to the Football Association. And it shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't allow Herentals to buy themselves freedom after they've been found with the smoking gun. And the one thing that they are pulling the trigger on is Zimbabwe football. Zimbabwe football is going to die a slow and painful death if we allow the disease that is corruption and match fixing to go on unabated. This was an opportunity that we had to make a meaningful statement, and unfortunately ZiFA so many times is found frustrating the PSL.
Z. This matter is not over yet. There are some chapters to be written. All we can do for now is implore ZiFA to do the right thing. They have the responsibility to protect the integrity of football in this country. But given their track record, it's very difficult to trust them, if we even trust them at all, because they should be taking a stand and clamping down on match fixing. I'm going to leave it here, okay? But before we go, Chris gives us around the world in 60.
Around the world in 60 seconds. International sports news.
We take off in Japan, where Tokyo 2020 Organizing Committee President Yoshiro Mori expects the new date for the postponed Olympic Games to be decided this week. Mori says suggestions have been made to hold the Games next year, either during the European spring or summer, and he confirmed that he would likely discuss the matter with International Olympic Committee President Thomas Bach. The Games, which were due to be held in Japan from the 24th of July to the 9th of August, have been postponed until 2021 due to the coronavirus pandemic. We head over to England, where, according to the German Tennis Federation Vice President Dirk Hordorf, Wimbledon organizers will announce the cancellation of the 2020 tournament on Wednesday due to the coronavirus pandemic. All England Lawn Tennis Club officials earlier said the event, due to begin on the 29th of June, would not be played behind closed doors, and says postponement was not without significant risk and difficulty. Touching down in Australia, Rugby Australia has been accused of knocking players out of critical talks about their future as the under-pressure governing body struggles to navigate a way through the coronavirus shutdown. Like elsewhere, rugby in Australia has ground to a halt, with the sports bosses facing major financial problems as revenue dries up. But unlike Rugby League and Australia rules, which have worked with their respective players to chart a way forward, the Rugby Union Players Association says it has been sidelined.
Z. All right, that was another jam-packed edition of ZiFM Sport from our homes as we are in lockdown. We'll be back tomorrow. If you want to continue the conversation, we are at ZiFM Sport on Facebook and Twitter. You can reach each one of us directly by searching for our names. We are really not that hard to find. But for now, take care of yourself and stay safe.